Hello, I'm Rachel Sandbrooks. I'm a writer and comedian, and this is the Stand By Your Nan podcast.
I've been a wild rover for many a year, and I spent all my money on
It's a podcast about my quirky nan, other grandmothers, and family histories. This week we're asking, are things changing for the older women today, or are matriarchs as invisible as they've always been? Our special guest is Francesca Beard, awesome spoken word artist who's been described as spine-tingling and the queen of British performance poetry, and has performed all over the world with her one-woman shows such as Chinese Whispers and How to Survive a Post-Truth Apocalypse. She's excellent. First, I'm asking the big questions, like why is my nan less important to talk about than Winston Churchill, and why is my role model an invisible nan? Anecdote. When I thought about doing a comedy show about female role models, I considered who was the most influence on me. Was it Frida Kahlo, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Katie Price? No, it was my brummy nan Eve, mainly because she spent time with me and she was awesome. And I think we should celebrate our matriarchs. Like, you can tell the whole of history in grandmothers, and it only takes 60 grands to get to Jesus. Probably. Other countries celebrate grannies. Like, the abuela of the Latin world, which is a title of respect. Or even in America, they've got a council of 13 Indigenous Native American grandmothers who have a medicine circle to heal the world. Good luck with that, ladies. My nan's only medicine circle was Vicks Vapor Rub, rubbed on your chest in a circular fashion and then shoved up your nose. I can imagine her touting it as a pandemic cure to the World Health Organization. You just rub a bit of Vicks on your chest, you'll be fine. The older women get, the more they get ignored. Over 40, society views you differently. Like on my last birthday, Facebook didn't wish me a happy birthday. They sent me an advert for Tenor Lady and money off a funeral. It's the equivalent of Logan's Run, but only for women when they get wrinkles. And if you understand that reference, you're as old as me and your red dot has started winking. I'm 50 and I'm slowly starting to disappear like Marty McFly and Back to the Future, but only if I tell people my age. People never see women in their 40s and 50s. They think you just turn into a wrinkled prune when you get past 29. So I get no pleasure in being constantly assumed to be in my 30s, because in media's eyes, in your 30s seems to last at least 3 decades, and then you're just old lady, which, as we all know, is just a comedy cartoon character. Not that there's anything wrong with being a little old lady. I loved them as a kid. I assumed they were from another planet, like they popped out of an alien womb, fully formed, with cauliflower hair, a bottle of Vicks and a Wayne hood. As a nan child, I loved the way old ladies looked. And on one hand, my gran was a classic nan. She had white candy floss hair, she was always smiling, and had a girdle that could hold in Krakatoa. And after Sprouts on Christmas Day, it often did. On the other hand, she was also into expressionist painting and Zen Buddhism, which she really needed living with my granddad. And I loved, the proper old ladies, like my Auntie Doris. She wasn't my auntie. I'm not sure whose auntie she was, but she always had eyebrows drawn up so high on her forehead, she looked like she'd permanently seen a ghost. I think she'd seemed down with the kids now. Now the older women have real eyebrows and minimal makeup. But when I was a kid, it was the old ladies with the surprised clown faces. I bet Doris would have loved contouring. Instagram, 3 million followers. You just draw a line like this. Things are starting to change. Like the French president is about 30 years younger than his wife, Brigitte. I wonder if she's baking fairy cakes and moaning about the weather. Older women now are more likely to be found bungee jumping than at bus stops, or on Tinder than a Stannah stairlift. Oh, so what is the alternative? And when do you get old anyway? Like, if 50's the new 30, 40's the new 20, will 60 actually be 60? As teenagers eschew nights out and rock and roll for parentally controlled online games in their bedrooms, will the new OAPs be out on the town with the teenagers moaning about them? Oh, you can't go out now for some dangerous old dear mugging you on the way to the bus stop. I don't really know why my teenager is very posh, but that's it. So the question is, are times changing, and how do we redefine being an old lady? All right, Grandma? for helping me with it, because we're starting now,
Well, it felt like it didn't feel like the beginning. Actually, it felt like a project which was developing and forming and building for quite a while. It felt like an incredibly organic and deep project for you, not something that you just decided on a whim. Okay, I'm going to do this. There's a zeitgeist for this and bish bosh.
Yeah.
So I did feel like I was kind of joining you on a journey that had been, started quite a long time ago, actually, even with your grandmother.
It has. It's just like, it's incredible. Anyway, what I should do really, because we will just chat, won't we, is I'll just say, so welcome to the Stand By Your Nan podcast, Francesca Beard, writer and performance poet, and who was also, as I've just been saying before, you see, I've already fluffed it up. I've only just started. Just saying.
To all those lovely people listening, I'm going to ask you this. Do you not quite love the fluffed up bits? Those are the bits that I really like.
Well, we started talking about this as a show, Stand By Your Nan, when I was just starting to talk about wanting to do a show about my grandmother. And so we have discussed this quite a few years ago, but it's been going on since 2016 now. And now it is turned into a podcast. And you were my first kind of person in mind when I thought about getting a guest in. So thank you very much for joining us, Francesca.
I've got my thumbs up for podcast people. I've got my physical, visual thumbs up.
Thank you so much. So my first question I'm going to ask you, which I'm going to ask everyone, is: do you have a nan story? Do you have a story about a grandmother that you'd like to share?
Oh, well, so I'm a mixed race, Southeast Asian and European. And on my dad's side, my dad's mother, Betty Marshall, born Betty Marshall, and then Betty Beard, my grandfather Stanley Beard.
What a fantastic name!
Betty Beard. She very sadly died from quite a rare disease when she was only 56. So I have very dim memories of her as this for some reason, because I grew up in Malaysia, so I kind of somehow conflated her with the lady in Brief Encounters, because she wore those kind of she always seemed quite elegant to me and very English. So I always picture her in black and white, and she did smoke as well, which was quite, because I think everyone smoked in those days. Like my dad said, she was such a proper, she cared about being really proper, and she was a bit kind of like, wanting to keep up with the Joneses, but she used to chain smoke. She'd carry around this tin of Players and light a cigarette off the last one, kind of thing. So I imagine her in that kind of permanent wave that a lot of the ladies had, and a pencil skirt and a kind of little nice jacket and a little one of those handbags that means that you can't actually do anything with your hands. Chain smoking in black and white. So that's on my European side. And then my mother's mother, my mother was one of 11 children, 9 of whom survived, and she was the third daughter of a Chinese household. So in Southeast Asia, there's a lot of immigration and migration all over the region. And my mother's family, my mother's mother came from quite a well-to-do Chinese mainland family that had emigrated to Malaysia. And she married out of her class, I guess, to the son of a Thai laborer who was, and so it was a love match, which then went wrong. And they had these 11 children, 9 of whom survived. And my mother was the third daughter in a tradition and a time when sons were really valued. And then there was a son directly after her. So she was just lower than the lowest of the lowest in the pecking order. And she had a terrible relationship with her mother, which bordered on This is a bit early in the podcast, but it was not good.
Yeah.
It bordered on kind of, it was certainly emotionally abusive. And then when my mother married my father, who's white, my grandmother didn't consider us her grandchildren. Yeah. So, and I watched my mother's heart keep breaking because she was always after approval from her mum. So I did not like my grandmother and she refused to speak English to us. And my mother would always try and get us together, and then she would just ignore me and my brother. So,
Wow.
But the Nan stories that I do have are not blood related. So there have been incredibly important grandmother figures in my life. That and one someone who absolutely formed me as a human being was a lady that I called Ying Chair, and who her family known as as Mrs. Koo, who became the matriarch of this wonderful family. But she was my nanny when I was growing up in Kuala Lumpur, and she was a Buddhist. She basically, I think, somehow gave me a complete entire philosophy on how to live and be a human being, which was so deep. And then I still think about her pretty much every week. She died when she was in her early 90s, actually. She died about 6 years ago, but I always talk about her to my children. So she was very important to me, a Chinese grandmother that I had. Yeah. And my English grandmother is actually the kind of adopted grandmother to my children, who has become one of my best friends. And she was a former neighbor, and she's 83. And I see her, even during lockdown. I actually saw her yesterday. I went to collect some posts for her. So I guess my grandmother's stories are that actually I think it's really important to have a grand figure in your life. And I have made my own. Or rather, they've come to me, and I've kind of really lent into that relationship and acknowledge it as the important relationships of my life, basically.
Oh, that's incredible. Thank you for sharing that. And it does bring to mind that those women hold a kind of space in our histories, in our global histories. And it doesn't take long, I think, when you start to talk to people about this subject, to really span so much wealth of experience and stories. And I love that you've adopted your own grandmother figures. And I think that's something that kind of goes past very quickly with people, doesn't it? They don't think about it that much, but it's true. I think we all do that a little bit. Maybe if we've missed a relationship that we don't love, we then go and get our own version of it. And I think that's just as valid as if you have a blood relation. I'm very close to my stepmother at the moment, and it's really interesting to see how she is fulfilling that grandmother role as well in a very different way to the blood relations do. So yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you for sharing that. The episode that I'm doing this time is about the invisible Nan. So I wanted to, there's a lot of puns in this podcast. I wanted to call this section the Nanecdotes, but I was getting a bit...
Oh, please, it's got to be the Nanecdotes.
So we're going to do all of that. But so this is the invisible Nan, and it is that myth, or I don't know if it is a myth. That's what I wanted to talk to you about. It's like, are older women invisible? Do you think that they aren't kind of seen in the wider media, or if I was thinking maybe where it seems to be to me that people disappear between 40 and 60, and then they arrive as if they are some kind of hallowed cartoon figure of a person, and that makes them somehow separate rather than part of a kind of aging process. So I just wanted to ask what your thoughts were on that.
Oh, this is such a juicy kind of topic of conversation. Well, I mean, and of course, as soon as you say 40 to 60, I kind of think about the menopause, So, well, first of all, talking about visibility and invisibility, my own experience is, yes, I think women do disappear between the ages of 40 and 60 in a way. I just kind of, and for me, there was a period of kind of a brief, intense, terrible, grieving period of mourning, followed by what I'm still kind of living through, an absolutely exalting period of joy and kind of power. And let me just explain that a bit more. So I really hated being visible when I was a younger person. Yeah. I kind of came to England at a point when being mixed race was not at all, and kind of went to a school where I was just ugly. I was ugly because I was not white, and that was just an accepted reality. That was consensus reality, and that was just accepted. And then through my adolescence, when I got to, I actually then went to a boys' school in the sixth form, and suddenly at that point there was a zeitgeisty change in which suddenly mixed race became a little bit exotic, particularly if you weren't that dark skinned. And it was also connected to a whole kind of exotification of the kind of oriental, problematic word, woman, the kind of like people having good memories of essentially kind of girls that were forced to, prostitute themselves in one way or another during the war in the Philippines. Wow. Or in Malaysia. Yeah. Or in Hong Kong or in Singapore, or, so I kind of suddenly became this object of incredible sexual interest for some people. And that the kind of the shock between going from being kind of ugly and socially, invisible to suddenly being really visible and very, objectified was formative for me. And I became infuriated by any kind of weight put on my physical appearance. Any kind of compliment would send me into an absolute rage. I just didn't take it as a positive thing at all. If anyone dared to comment on my physical appearance, and certainly not my physical attractiveness, unless it was absolutely kind of owned and controlled by me, I was a nightmare. I was in a rage all the time. Like, people would look at me on the bus and I'd kind of aggressively challenge them. Like, it was continual and really destructive, actually. And then as I got older, it was tempered, and I kind of learned to use it. As women, we all have experiences, don't we, of having to to work with something that we might not have chosen, which is to be an object of desire. You kind of then make your deals with, okay, well, this person is going to give me a job because of this, and then I can parlay that into that. But it's never comfortable. It would never be anyone's first choice, I think. So when I suddenly, at the age of about maybe 45, 46, became invisible, it was like this slow fade. I would walk down the street and suddenly no one would look at me. No one would acknowledge me. I would go into a room and the attention would be completely directed elsewhere. There was a period of shock, I think, of me negotiating that, and a period of kind of loss of identity. And I went through I plunged into this really deep, lasted about 9 months of midlife crisis, where I suddenly started reading celebrity magazines and kind of like had these weird obsessions on much younger male celebrities. And it was weird, and I felt out of control with it. And then suddenly it lifted, and I was like, this is what I've been waiting for my entire life. Yeah. No one wants me for my, no one's going to look at me. No one's going to give me any attention. And from then on, it's just been the best thing. It's been glorious. And my kids really laugh at me. I'm 53 now, and they're just like, because I'm becoming quite quite eccentric and quite kind of like I'm really leaning it. I was like, said to them, there's two ways I can go. I can become a really stern, like Chinese type grandmother, or I can become that crazy one that walks like this. And an imitation of like, and they're like, you can't do that, Mum, it's racist. And I'm like, yeah. And I kind of sing when I kind of sing on the streets and really leaning into being kind of quite eccentric and free. I feel really free.
That's wonderful. I was thinking when you were saying about being visible sexually early on, I do remember very clearly walking down the high street when I was 15 in school uniform and being wolf whistled. And I got to the point where I didn't want to leave the house because this was kind of late 80s, early 90s kind of thing.
Complete building sites. Walking past the building site in your grungiest clothes.
And with your head down and at you. Yeah. And I remember tried to be picked up by people in cars. If I walked down the wrong bit of Birmingham, if I walked down in Balsall Heath, I would have cars slow down and ask me how much. And I was like, look at me, look at how I'm dressed. It's quite obvious that I don't want that attention. And I can very distinctly remember that. I don't think I've had your experience of walking in a room and everybody thinking I'm wonderful. I don't know if that's just me. Maybe I've always kept my head down a little bit because of that experience.
It's probably
because you're like
complete paranoia.
Yeah. Maybe it's that kind of like self-consciousness thing, but there's a possibility. I've really kind of did feel like I wanted to be invisible. And then now, you start to get to this point, but I realized there is a power in that. It does make you feel like, I don't know about you, but I'm 50 this year. And it is starting to make me feel a bit more like, I keep saying to myself, is this how men feel? Like, where you can just kind of go and do what you like without having to excuse yourself constantly. And that just reminded me of my nan actually started to do stuff when she was 55. So she started painting and she started doing loads of creative stuff. So it must have been at some point she kind of decided she would shed that feeling of I've got to do what I'm told and turn into this very eccentric person. So, you're feeling that now. You're feeling the call of the
I'm living my best life, I tell you. I really am. I think, I always feel a bit kind of guilty to say this because I acknowledge and I know that, and you can never tell how it's going to go, can you? You can never tell, when I say it, I'm conscious that for many people, menopause is really painful and hard, but also incredibly destabilizing and destructive. And and I think that those conversations need to be had. And I didn't have that experience personally. I kind of went from having periods and being not menopausal to not having any periods like that there wasn't any real issue. I didn't feel it was super easy for me. So I think however, what I've witnessed is sometimes it's like a kind of baptism of fire. So I've witnessed some of my friends and acquaintances go through really hard menopauses, and actually they've kind of burn off any kind of F's to give about certain things. Like they've gone, I don't have time for this anymore. They've literally been kind of like suffused by rage. They've kind of burnt up with this kind of like and come out the other side, and left their partners, kind of left their careers, burnt bridges, burnt boats, all those kind of burning metaphors, and emerged kind of a different person, sometimes quite shell-shocked, but still different. I mean, so I didn't have that, but I think the experience I had early on about having to care so much what people thought, because I felt like it was continually projected onto me, has given me this absolute appreciation for not being visible as a kind of desirable woman, and for a kind of consensus reality type thing. Yeah.
So it is about that kind of who's looking. It's about it being desirable as a woman. But then I wonder if we're not, it's like as soon as that goes, we're still not listening to older women after that. It's like, oh yeah, your use has gone, now we won't listen to you. So I get that it's brilliant that you're invisible in some ways, and then in other ways I think, so in some ways, you could heist a bank, it would be fine. But in other ways I think, well, why aren't we listening? There was that whole thing of, why aren't we hearing what older women have said? Like I did share with you that Mary Beard article, because I thought it was really interesting. She was looking at older women in history and how there was a witch hunt, and people are scared of women with long grey hair. And there is that kind of image of you're either cozy or you're some kind of devil in disguise of a person. So
I think maybe this is just rose tinted, but I think people do listen to older women. I do. I think, people listen to Mary Beard. She's got long grey hair. I mean, they love her, right? She's very popular, and she has a platform. And then I think about world leaders. There are a number of women world leaders. I'm kind of thinking about the pandemic, and all those statistics about the countries led by women of a certain age who have all done really, really well, and I think kind of Taiwan and Germany and New Zealand, she's pretty young still, she's a young mum, but I think I don't want to be kind of, I don't want to feel like I'm not in solidarity, but there's a quote by Bjork that I always think about, which is, the cage is open.
Yeah.
The cage is open. Like, we can, I think a lot about freedom in my I guess my work, and it's freedom is something which I'm really kind of drawn to thinking about what it means. And I don't think it means doing what you want necessarily. I think it comes with a kind of responsibility, and I think it can be quite hard to take freedom. Yeah. But I think that,
Do you think though that the women that are taking power and do seem to be doing really well, but they're still there is a lot of power that isn't in their hands as well? I mean, I guess I'm just thinking of what's happened in Britain, but then Dido Harding's not done particularly well with the test and trace, so she's not a good example. I'm trying to think of someone who I can say would. I mean, Nicola Sturgeon, if we look at how she's been coping with things, there's a lot of there is still a hold over things. But do you think things are changing then? Do you think people are being heard, and there is
in my experience, it's always, for me, it's about, there are so many things that you can't change and that you can't control. And the one thing you can potentially, although it's difficult, change and control is how you behave and how you act and what you do. And like, you're doing this podcast.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You're making a podcast about older women, about nans. You're celebrating older women. That's something that you have chosen to do, and that you are doing now, and you are putting into the world, and that must feel good, right? And
yeah, it does. But I do still think that there are situations where I've been into meetings and things and workshops where they've said, really, we only want to relate to the 16 to 25 market. And there was one recently, there was a call out for comedy writers, and they were saying our audience is 40 to 50-year-olds, but we only want characters that are 20.
They're clearly wrong, aren't they?
Yeah, I think they are wrong.
They're clearly wrong. They're clearly missing a trick.
So that's why we're here.
That's why we're here. Yeah. And unfortunately, they might hold the kind of purse strings at the moment and be gatekeepers at the moment. But I think things are changing, and the only way they are going to change is if we change them, because no one's going to come along and kind of clear a path for you when it's not in their interest, sadly.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? But I think women of women of 40 to 60 are incredibly powerful and actually are often in positions of power. Maybe not maybe not enough, or maybe there's kind of, there could be more kind of acknowledgement or more solidarity.
I think we could all do with kind of speaking to different generations myself. I think like it like you say, maybe there is a lot of, maybe there's power, there's a lot of experience in older women over 60 as well. And instead of being kind of on separate sides, we could be thinking more in terms of, well, how younger women and older women can have a conversation about all these things. Because I know sometimes it feels like cliff edges that you're going over and you become this kind of different person. But that's been really interesting. I like the fact that you are believing in the power of the older women anyway, and that we can kind of maybe redefine what that is. So I know that there was one question I really wanted to ask, which was, and I think you've kind of answered it a little bit, but I'd like to ask it anyway. So what would you like to be when you grow up, when you become the old lady? How do you kind of see yourself? Heisting banks? Or
Oh, no. I mean, I've got like really great role models for being an older lady, from the women that I was talking about before.
Yeah.
So Heather, my friend Heather, who I call my BFF, she's 84 this year, and she is just awesome. She's like, her whole mantra is be kind. And I think that's really, and she is incredibly kind, but she's also really good fun. And also she's the kind of person that if it's a bit boring or there's nothing much in it for her, then she'll probably try and get out of it. So her whole be kind, which I think is really important as well. Like, you don't want any kind of po-faced kind of martyry behavior. So she has an enormous amount of fun, but she's also incredibly, I guess, connecting for a community that's growing around her. I think people in general are really attracted to certain types of energy. Like, my instinct, if I see someone try and do something which is building and positive and generates a kind of sense of, fun or positive energy, I will gravitate towards that. But I think people say yes to that, or the type of people you want to attract will say yes to that. And she puts out that energy in the world, and there's continually lovely things going on with her. It makes me so happy that she's so close to my kids as well.
Yeah.
Who are both girls. So she's such an incredible role model. And I just think there are so many ways of being powerful in the world. And I think one of the more powerful ways is to kind of affect the people kind of, in your actual local community. Yes. You know what I mean? Like, because there's, if we focus on the big picture, it can get really hopeless. I think, how can I possibly make a difference about this or that? Or, when I do this, it's hurting someone, on the other side of the world, or what are we going to, and I think that really saps your energy. Whereas a lot of her energy is almost immediately rewarded in this wonderful feedback loop, because she's just really active and kind of positive in her community. And it does spread out, I think.
Yeah. I think that's wonderful, that idea that you can be center of a community and to look who is around you. I mean, we've all had that experience in lockdown, looking at where you actually live, what road you're on, who's actually nearby. And I know we both do kind of community work. I know that you're kind of a community activist, really, like you're really doing a lot for that. And I do think there's something about having that positive community action where you literally just put on something for people to join in somehow. and you don't just kind of shut the door on people because they're not your audience or your market or something like that. You literally go, we are all in this together, and I'm interested to know what you're all about. So that sounds fantastic. I look forward to you rejuvenating communities as a in your power kind of pose as an older woman.
Oh no, I mean they're there though as well. Do you know what I mean? It's the energy kind of really, that's what I see. It's a kind of, it's not like this selfless action. I think if you feel connected in a kind of good, positive way to people, it makes you feel good.
Yeah, this is so true. It builds it, doesn't it? Whereas when you're doing something more negative or more competitive in a way, it kind of cuts things off. I like the idea of building things with people and with positive energy, though I feel like I'm losing my plot a little bit.
I mean, I guess in terms of role model, of being older and kind of what my goals are, I feel like okay, here's one thing. So I do performances and I do shows. Yeah. And I'm also really lazy as well. So I can't
believe it.
No, honestly, I think laziness is like one of my best qualities, because it means that, I like to have a good effect, but I don't want to spend any more energy than I need to get like really good results. So it often makes me kind of think of quite cool or alternate or lateral ways to kind of do things. It's like, that's too long. What if we do that? Or that's why I do a lot of audience interaction and participation in my shows, which I try and make meaningful and actually structurally part of the show. And the big reason for that was I find it really hard to learn lines. Like my memory isn't amazing. Like some people can just read a script and remember it immediately. And I was like, God, how am I gonna reduce the amount I have to learn? Ooh, well, if I do some improvisational stuff, particularly if it involves audiences, and then I thought, because audiences really love it if they look great, and because everyone loves just that kind of, and it's so surprising and it's everyone's favorite part. And then you have to actually make it good. You can't make it token. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, for example, that's an example. That's a total example of laziness. Like all of the parts in my shows, which are the best parts, which are audience, improvisational, kind of immersive, pivotal stuff. That's total laziness that just avoids having to learn script.
This is a whole new podcast about how to devise with Francesca.
But so my goal is to have as much fun as possible. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And also to be as, I think, to have fun and be kind and kind of like allow other people, give other people permission to have fun and be kind. That would be my absolute goal getting older. Because I think when you get older, there is a kind of permissiveness. Like I know you've been working with a group of older people, as have I. And I've been working with the same group now of older people at risk of isolation. They're based in Islington. And we meet now, and we've met throughout lockdown on Zoom, which has been a bit tricky because no one is a digital native. And, our oldest member is 96 this year. But we have got everyone on Zoom, and the organization I work with is amazing. And they've got people tablets with kind of contracts so that they and then pay people's phone bills if they don't need to use landlines to go on Zoom. But that group is just amazing. And they're like, and one of the reasons that they're amazing is because they're old. They're at this part of, because when you get to be old, not only do you have this amazing experience of life, and you kind of slow down, so you've got a bit less ambitious for things you think you should be less ambitious for, and much more ambitious of things that you think are actually genuinely important about the world. And also, you've got very little F's to give because you haven't got that much time. You can't waste time trying to please other people that you don't care about. So they've been amazing to work with, because it's been like, okay, as you get older, you understand that life is amazing and precious. We don't have that much time. What do we really want to do?
Mm.
And I
Well,
think,
have fun and be kind.
Yes.
I love that. I think that's my new mantra. I'm going to write it down. So there is a history of older women being ignored and made invisible, but many women report enjoying actually the lack of attention because it leaves them free to do other things like heist banks or snort Horlicks, that kind of thing. But as we're evolving, perhaps our perception of age and ability is flawed. And as I get older, I bloody well hope so. In essence, being an older woman could be the prime time for freedom and finally living your life how you want to. But also, it's a privilege. I mean, come on, you're still alive. We've been devastated by COVID. Let's stop playing small and speak up. Don't do what everyone expects you to do. Rise up and then sit down again because, you got up a bit too quickly. But then rise up. Say, I am Granticus. No, I am Granticus. It's fine. Je suis grand-mère. Stand By Your Nan has been written and performed by Rachel Sandbrooks, co-produced with Steve Keyworth and with music by Lewis Barfoot. It's a Gertie Words production funded by Arts Council England.
And now I'm returning with golden great store.